Okay, so we've just realized that a lot of the energy and whatnot comes after the conversation, not necessarily before. And this particular one that you're about to see happened after a brilliant conversation with two lawyers on the ground in India, in Delhi. So I think we want to just rephrase this segment as behind the scenes instead of before the conversation.
No, we are agile. We are agile. We are agile. Yeah, and
showing off our agility. There is like a misunderstanding between people. They don't really want to become part of the system because the system is not taking care of them.
We have to create a world where I used to say where humans are at the center, but I'm now saying where life and the sustenance of life is at the center. Not corporations, not capital.
Providing this platform where people in countries can talk about what they are actually seeing with their own eyes and experiencing unfiltered and letting it get out there to a global audience is a huge thing, you know, in a time when governments are just still focused on PR and making themselves look good.
Oh my God. I think that was the best conversation we had.
Yeah.
I think on this show so far, I mean, oh gosh, it's not good to say that, right? Because
no, because we say that about almost every conversation.
Because each conversation is getting better and better, maybe. Yeah. Oh God, that sounds bad.
No, I actually think that they're very good from each from different perspectives. Yeah. So with Magda, we got incredible amount of very straightforward information about how the trade actually
the politician today, Jessica. Yes, yes, give the political statement. We got, yeah, go ahead, Anya.
No, but I mean, every single person that we had an interview with provided us with a very good viewpoint. So they are expert in their own domain. That is why in that very domain, this is going to be the most brilliant talk we'll ever have, right? And all together, I mean, there is a personal connection to another human being that we have. So yeah, we are improving, absolutely. But it is also that every single talk that we had was the best possible in that single domain.
Yeah, but I just have to say, but I was very, very pumped after this particular one with Shurti and Sundeep. About India. Oh God, powerful stuff shared, man. Yes,
yeah, not only that, like what we've previously said, the story that she was mentioning, Shruti, about her dad and how she was trying to solve that situation. You know how she said, I had to call and contact, like use all of my contacts that I had. And the whole story, I mean, itself was so similar to what Margaret was going through. I was like, this is happening on
I went through, Jessica,
the Caribbean.
I went through the same thing. Yeah, because remember, with me, my whole background is anti-corruption and transparency and good governance. And so I've been in so many situations many times when people say, oh, call this person that you know now. Could you help us with this now? Let's get in with this minister now because of certain connections I may have. And perennially, my position has always been, no, I'm not doing that. I don't think it's appropriate. That's not the way to go. Then my brother got sick. And all of the issues with the public hospitals. And exactly like Shurti, I found myself when I'm facing life and death, well, I have to pick up the phone. And so I'm picking up the phone, calling and doing whatever I can. And at the same time, I mean, I was grateful for the connections to be able to help my brother through the situation that he was going through. But at the same time, I was so angry that I had to resort to this, and that it made me feel, what about the people who do not have these connections?
Can't name drop.
This is not a fair, it's not a fair world that we are creating. And so when Shurti brought that up and really started to talk about these things, I mean, she just got me in my heart. in my soul.
But what does it say about, so this is very much a Caribbean thing too, where, and I'm wondering if it is, maybe you can provide some perspective, Annie, is this something that happens in Slovenia? That just to get basic public services, you get through faster if you know someone, if you can name drop, you know, someone important and whatnot, and hold someone's boss over their heads. Is this?
I mean, it's human, isn't it? We are all social human beings, and being a social being actually means that we create different connections to, you know, humans that we know. We work together, or we had a story together. We all are very social. It means that we are human if we make connections. And it's so interesting. I mean, maybe in Scandinavian countries where they really have very good social systems, like my dad here was constantly raising me up with a very good notion that we should never skip the lines.
Yeah.
Skipping a line and using those contacts actually means that somebody else is going to be deprived of that service, and we are not making the equalities visible. But at the same time, I mean, having a democracy and having everybody treated equal does not really mean that, you know, we are having the equality in place. Everybody is in fact unequal. So if there is some sort of a reputation system in place, we just need to figure out how that reputation system works. Is it really that because I'm a woman, I need to be treated that way? Or is it because my I have an ID and I have the social security, this is why I'm treated this way? And we have established different social norms that doctors are now putting in place when I come as a patient. But in fact, there are so many different layers in our social community that we can still be using. It's just so funny because, like, in China, they have an expression for that. They call it guanxi. It literally means the connections. But it became so visible, and so, like, the more guanxi you had, the higher you were on the ladder of the social community, right? The bigger honor you gain, or the more you were respected as a person in that community. The same system pretty much works in Italy. We just call it the mafia. Same system pretty much works here. We just call it corruption. And it's so interesting. All of these things have different names, but basically what they present are the connections and the community and the social rules that we've established next, and as an alternative to the system that, you know, functions the official way. But what that tells me is that we all have different rules and norms when it comes especially to critical situations like yours with your brother, or with the father of that lady, or whenever we are put in a critical position like the crisis is bringing to us. And what that tells me is that there's so much room for improvement. There is so much more elements and layers that we need to take into account when we are deciding who's got the priority, or who needs to be treated, and who needs to be skipping the line, if we want to say. There will always be situations when people will have to skip the line, or will at least try to, and we need to figure out why.
Yeah, I want to touch off on something Anya just said, because, you know, it is a debate in the corruption field, in the anti-corruption field, that we are trying to impose Western approaches to governance, and calling things corruption when it is just something that Anya was just hinting to.
Sure.
Something, a culture, and a natural, and maybe not even culture, a natural human function to reach out to those with whom you are connected. Humanity, language, we cannot live, we cannot do anything without connection. When we're born as babies, right? And a baby cannot survive without connection. First, a connection being made, someone taking care of them. So it's almost natural function. And so it leads me to ask the question, could it be that, you know, our anti-corruption approaches making it that there must be arm's length between the politician and the citizen, the decision maker and the citizen, is actually an unnatural structure that we are imposing in order to achieve some value that we hold in the context of a system. But it's an unnatural value or approach. So, for example, could it be that we could approach anti-corruption not from the perspective of separating the politician from the citizen, but could we approach, and that's what transparency and accountability and all these things, and it's about separation of the politician from the citizen. Maybe we can approach anti-corruption differently, where it's about closing the gap, the space between the politician and the citizen, and democratizing access. Not only information, not only information, but connection, democratizing connection, right? And maybe this whole COVID with the digital space, where, you know, it's going to be the use of digital tools can help to democratize that connection and that access to politicians that we didn't have before. It's not just information, I think we're seeing coming out of this little conversation we're having here, right? There's something about connection that's natural and human, and yet our anti-corruption systems try to deny it and cut
while
it out.
At the same time blocking connection and putting stumbling blocks between people and the outcomes they desire, whether those outcomes, it's access to information or to a particular process. And now because of this pandemic, people are now being forced to do things themselves, right? The NIC has here in St. Lucia has just made all the unemployment relief forms and stuff, which you used to have to go to their office, line up in a line, go through clerk number 1, clerk number 2, whatnot. It's just an online form now. This could have been done all the time. And you know, and of course, in the old system, you would have to know someone to try and see if you could get through a little faster. I'm sure the same thing with the processing of passports. You know, things that we used to have to go through this gauntlet of red tape in the form of people, gatekeepers, and the old system used that in a way to also exert power and control, and to also provide pseudo types of, well, we're realizing now they weren't real jobs. They were pseudo jobs. They weren't, you know.
that was an incredible result when Sundeep was talking about it, how they have these migrants that are working and are having the wages on a daily basis. And these workers are not at all identified in the system. They're not workers by recognized at all. They probably don't even have the social standard established. They are not now allowed to get some support from the state because they're not recognized in the system. And I'm just curious, how many more people do we have that are not provided with an ID that serves all these purposes? And this is so, I mean, to some extent, it's fantastic. It's like we've also been here kind of safeguarding the water resources. And then what happened was that those who were building houses on a black market without having them recognized in an official system were not getting the water supply because they were not in the system. And our courts decided to still provide them with a water supply, never, completely regardless of the fact that they were actually building all these buildings on a black market. And to me, that was absurd to some extent, because, you know, we all have these systems in place. We all are providing people with social ID, with passports, with all these securities based on them being recognized by the system and based on the fact that they want and are willing to become part of our system. What picture that Sundeep was providing us today tells me is that there is a misunderstanding between people. They don't really want to become part of the system because the system is not taking care of them. Exactly. And the system at the same time does not really want them to become part of the system because there's no money, or there's no jobs to supply to them, or there's people that are working with the system or that are on top of the system do not recognize and do not understand how the system can even help those on the bottom. The gap is widening because there is so much misunderstanding in place. That's
I saw you crying in the interview, Anya. I saw you tearing up.
That was so bad.
Yeah, you did get emotional.
I was really sad. Even now I'm getting emotional back. It's incredible. Like, we don't get those stories. I mean, you have to get down and speak to these people, and I'm so glad that we are having Zooms, but like from the news, even if I'm calling people, they won't be telling me these stories. It's, sorry to use that expression, but it's so fucked up.
Yeah.
And you guys realize what we're doing is really braver, because a lot of these things, like when the first thing she brought up was that government may be blocking accurate information from getting out. We may not even know the full extent of what's going on.
But that's true of many countries.
Talking to people
that's
on the ground,
almost every country,
everywhere.
Yeah.
But providing this platform where people in countries can talk about what they are actually seeing with their own eyes and experiencing, unfiltered, and letting it get out there to a global audience is a huge thing, you know. In a time when governments are just still focused on PR and making themselves look good.
Exactly. Just because they're collecting the points and just because they have to be elected by their own citizens. And this is what is so absurd, and this really bothers me deep down. Like, all these governments that we have to vote and that we are voting for, they really are just collecting our own points. And they will, at the end of the day, do everything that is in our own interest and will not be, like, they're not being pushed towards getting the broader picture together, because there's no interest. They're being voted and they're coming into power because I vote them, not because an Indian guy votes them. However, at the end of the day, that same person that I vote to is going to be in the parliament and is going to be part of the UN and is going to have the power vested in him to actually change stuff on a global level. And this is like, I think that 2020 and our century, or our like thousands of years that we are having ahead of us, are really going to be about how do we go from, okay, now I recognize myself as being a global citizen, towards, okay, our democracy is not really working well on a global scale. How can I become a global democratic person? How can I actually have some of the power vested in me as well as being a global citizen? How do we create this type of a decision-making process? Because right now it's not functioning. We do have UN, yes, but look at what's happening now. Yeah. We have WHO, and WHO is perhaps in place to really provide us with some guidance, but I mean, it's being supported by Bill Gates. Who are we kidding? Come on.
Oh, you got to raise a whole cat words there.
There is so much to be said out loud that I'm bursting into tears, because I just don't have the words to describe all the mess that we have created through thousands of years ago.
We have spent way too much time regulating individual citizens and not regulating people at the top. And the fact that someone has to jump through a whole bunch of hoops just to install a composting system instead of getting into the city sewer supply. Yeah. You know, they have to go through a whole bunch of red tape for something so simple.
And using and
a large company, you know, can get away with polluting, and you know, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, and decentralized energy. Right now, each of us should be able to just put up our solar and get our own energy, but the regulatory obstacles to that, entrenching that sector, is crazy, right? And so, yeah, man, it's
and the people who call themselves so-called libertarians, you know, and they're all about individual freedom, but it's not. What they're talking about is freedom for corporations to do whatever they ask they want, while government still gets to impose on your life, individual citizens' life.
We have created a legal and economic system where corporations and those who have capital have the ability to do far more, to move across the globe as they see fit, to have access to more opportunity than the average citizen. So corporations and capital on one side and citizens, average citizens on the next. You know, and if we want to, you know, hold on to and really seize the moment, like Harari is urging us to seize the moment for a reset, right? We have to create a world where I used to say where humans are at the center, but I'm now saying where life and the sustenance of life is at the center, not corporations, not capital, not the making of profit, you know? So, yeah, and I hope that the work that we are doing with lawyers all over the world, Anya and Jessica, will be a tiny piece of the puzzle, tiny piece working to engineer that kind of future.
And I think people need to know that that Future Law Institute is one of many things that USolve is doing. Yeah. And because
empathy.
We are tackling this thing from many different angles.
Absolutely.
The legal part is a huge part of it.
And a little plug, we have over 100 lawyers working with us worldwide now, right? The last video we did on it, we said over 80 lawyers, but it's now over 100. And they're incredible and they inspire me every day. You just had a conversation with two of them, Jessica, with us. Let me tell you, you talk to these lawyers and at the end of it, very much like how we feel at the end of these conversations with the experts that we are having, you know, we can do this. We get hope. We get hope at the end of it, because when you see the people who are thinking just like you and who want to work hard and want to create a better future for all, I think we will find a way. We don't know, we don't fully understand the path, right? We can't even fully imagine really what the future could be. We can, but let me tell you, we know that with the people who are sharing the same values and the same passion to create the change working together, we're going to get there. You know, we're going to get, there.
We're already creating the waves. It's good.
We have to create the hope. We're creating the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what was it that Shurti said? Hope is, I wrote it down because I just love it.
You can't wait for hope in order to create the change. You have to create the change and the
yes.
hope will come.
So here she put it, which I think was a quote from Robert Unger, I think. She said, hope is not the condition for action. Hope is the result of action. Woo! That's why I call you my darlings, Anya and Jessica. Let us act.
Yes.